Hello and welcome to Very Much Earth's Arcana. I'm your host, Harrison Cordell, here to introduce you to Matthew Eastdale.
Well, hello.
On today's episode, we talk about some things Force-related, other things future-related, and all things science fiction. We're doing a very straight-laced intro today because we have some straight-laced characters to talk about. We're diving into Paladin subclasses. Possibly the straightest character you could do. Paladins are the sort of divine martial class of D&D. Think a mix of fighter that does fighting and cleric that does praying. But now, not only does he attack, he also pray?
He's got the power of God and anime on his side.
He does. I mean, you could do an oath of anime. That could be a good meme one down the connection. But yeah, Paladins are a really interesting class in D&D, as in they're very good at slicing and dicing and wearing a lot of heavy armor, but they're also good at religion. They're a little bit more intelligent than the average fighter, unless you're playing like a, psychic fighter, which is a pretty cool subclass.
And also charisma focused with their secondary spell casting, so they can do more leadership role play stuff too, if you'd like to go that route.
Exactly. Paladin is honestly a little bit of a tricky class in that sense. You have to have good charisma for your spellcasting and your sort of divine presence, but for your divine knowledge, you need to invest in intelligence, and of course you need to invest in strength to, basically carry the team on your back as the moralist heathens that adventurers are. And also just swinging a weapon very good. I'm currently playing a dexterity-based paladin, which is very fun, but it's good to just be a beefy, god-loving boy, Technically, you don't actually have to be, a God-loving sort of guy. Religion in D&D, pretty interesting that way, in the fact that there are, gods in existence that honestly can't be denied. They very much exist and very much grant, a lot of benefits to their followers and a lot of, smiting and evil stuff if you're not one of the followers. Classic big bad kind of energy. There's a lot of very interesting things to play with, paladins and religion in D&D, because there are a lot of subclasses that let you devote yourself. More than religion, it's about faith, first and foremost. It's always super interesting in that regard when talking about you devote yourself to, let's stick with paladins for the example. Your declarations of faith come in at about level 3, which, hot take, it should be level 1 like the cleric. It's kind of weird because so much, unlike other, there's a few classes that do a level 1 subclass that sort of define how you do what you do, as we talked about in episode 0, but this is honestly one of the only classes at 3rd level that completely defines how you are as a person, how to practice your faith in a just sort of game setting. As a paladin, you take an oath. This oath can be pretty simple. There's oath of devotion. That's your basic, white bread and glass of water paladin of just I'm devoted to a god. Yeah, but there's a lot more complicated ones than that. There's Oath of Glory, which is a very Greek-inspired, Colosseum Roamer of just I will battle for glory and empower other people to seek their own glory. And most of their oaths are literally about hey, you hone your body, you hit the gym every day, no days off. That sort of energy. A Goblin Paladin that I'm playing right now is Oath of the Crown, as he's devoted to the Goblin King. He has a lot of abilities about sort of crowd control and taking the hits for others, in case his king is in danger, he puts himself in harm's way. And also he can compel duelant, a lot of fun stuff. A lot of oaths are not only grant powers based on what your purpose is, but also how you should act. There's so every oath has 3 basic tenements that we'll see in our subclasses today that are all very cool. You also get spells in this subclass, which a lot of other 3rd levels don't. What spells they cast depends on where they draw from their power, obviously. So yeah, really cool. It's just really good on lore and character building and role playing. Paladins all roll up to 1, and you should always select it at 1st level. And it's kind of weird that no further D&D edition. Well, not edition, but further D&D update allows you to choose it at 1st level, because that's why I usually start one-shots and other campaigns at level 3, because without subclasses, especially in the case of Paladin, you just kind of feel naked.
Yeah, definitely at the first couple levels of most of the time, it feels very much like you got stick, you whack, you got sorcery, you do sorcery, without a ton of like those other mechanics that start to add a lot of the flavor and stuff into
exactly, yeah.
And the cooler mechanics too. So
Exactly, yeah. A lot of the cool stuff. I mean, I do understand the actual climb from level 1 to 20 is designed so that way, like the beginning of it, you are just learning the basics. You have anywhere you can go with no, you have to find your direction while playing the game. But, you know, we here at vmearcana and like the people I play with, we always care. We kind of like already have a direction for the character when we create it. And a lot of people don't play like that. So, yeah. I mean, that's why the level 1 to 20 system works as well as it does it, because people can start wherever they want in their campaign and play to their comfort. Like if you're learning the game, start at level 1. If you're aware of the game's rules but haven't been able to play yet, start with level 3. But speaking of level 3, let's level up and choose our Paladin subclass right now. So the first subclass we have for today is a pretty special one, in my opinion. Not a special one. A ton of people have done this in their own homebrews, and Star Wars 5e is a pretty big juggernaut of its own. But I don't want to go too complex into Star Wars 5e because it's complex and it scares me. Kind of like how it's like to start D&D. So maybe someday we'll cover it on this podcast. But in the meantime, we have two very special sci-fi-driven subclasses. We're talking uppercase S science fiction here. So let's just jump into the king of all science fiction, Star Wars. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, how would you do a Star Wars one? I thought this podcast was about comic books. Well, joke's on you. Okay.
If there's Star Wars comic books.
Yeah, exactly. Star Wars comic books saved Marvel from bankruptcy back in the 90s. All of like this sort of lead up to the prequels and Shadows of the Empire like came in. It's just like, hey, we need somebody to publish Star Wars comics, but we're not going to pay people a bunch. And Marvel was like, hey, we'll take anything, man. We're selling filing cabinets. And if that's not 100% correct, you got me. Hey, go on our Patreon and comment. Speaking of Patreon, these all PDFs we talk about this episode are available on patreon.com/vmearcana for free. If you just want to look at it and go in the comment section and talk about any, recommendations you have or passive-aggressive comments about how you don't like it, and it should be more fantasy. All right, let's just into this Jedi-inspired subclass, Oath of Connection. Now, there are many wonderful Jedi subclasses for monks, for clerics. I think I saw one time for like a Sithy kind of like barbarian one. That was kind of cool where you can dash around and like force lightning and stuff. But I think Paladin, because not only is it like a mix of spellcasting and martial class, but like faith is a very important part of being a Jedi, other than trade negotiations for...
And that kind of gets to, too, how, your paladin doesn't necessarily have to be a god-loving boy. It's more just having faith in something, even if that's some sort of ill-defined cosmic force.
Speaking of an ill-defined cosmic force, let's define it a little bit. But is it defined? I guess we'll find out. Cue the dramatic music. The Oath of Connection. Power doesn't come from the gods. It comes from those you trust and those who trust you. And the trust you put in the world around you. The trust in the balance of the light and dark. The trust in the connection of all things, living or not. Bit of a short and sweet one. Basically, the sort of unifying force in your campaign could be just the connections between things. In the King Killer Chronicles that Eli has had me read, magic works in empathy, the connection between two things. It's kind of inspired by that. And the force is binding everything, but calling something the force is probably a rights violation. I don't know. I don't know how Lucasfilm or Disney can copyright the term the force, but they probably figured out a way to do it.
I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah. The oaths for this. For every oath, as a paladin, you have these sort of sub-oaths. These are the tenements that you live by and have to operate by while adventuring, or else you'll lose your powers. At the DM's discretion, you can have a 3-strike system, Yeah, so 3 sub-oaths, balance, adventure, excitement. A hero does not crave these things. You are not an adventurer. You are on a mission. So you got to be pretty serious about what you're doing. You can't goof around too much, which is hard to break that in a regular home game. So.
Yeah. Especially with our group.
Connection. The world is connected to all things. You must live peacefully and respect all things, and you must foster strong corrections if you wish to grow stronger. You got to be nice. A lot of paladin things have certain things of just oh, you need to get this from someone. It's oh, you need to show someone the way. And a thing about the Jedi is that, they're supposed to be really respectful and really respect cultural boundaries. It's just hey, we're just crazy magic knights that slice everything, but we'll leave you to your religion or whatever.
Exactly. They're peacekeepers, not warriors or whatever they try and say in the
Whatever
prequels.
their slogan is on the pamphlet they give to like parents of 2-year-olds that can like jump around like 5 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Commitment. Do or do not, there is no try. You must commit to everything you do. Never back down from a challenge and you will eventually succeed. So don't run away, just commit to something. Hopefully these are good guidelines for like, a pretty solid like active character in a campaign, because it is kind of easy as a paladin to be like, it's just like, oh, I'll follow someone. My path is just to exist and be faithful. But hopefully these tenets will make someone more active while playing. Maybe a new player could find like some more sort of active ways to participate if they're just like, okay, I have to work and I have to take this mission seriously. So I'm going to have some agency, which is like the hardest thing to get as like a player. D&D is like to get enough agency. And then we get to the fun stuff. Paladins at 3rd level, 5th level, 9th level, 13th level, and 17th level. It's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, there's a spell table that'll give you spells that you can cast.
At 3rd level, you imbue any sword with the power to create a sacred weapon connected to the world itself. After you remove the blade, you carve a divine rune into the hilt. The divine rune can ignite as a free action and summon a blade of pure radiant light. The blade has the same stats as the sword before you enchanted the hilt, but you now add your charisma modifier to attack rolls. The weapon also emits a light in a 10-foot radius and a dim light 10 feet beyond that. The weapon damage is now considered magical.
Very cool.
That
Very
sounds
cool.
a lot like a lightsaber.
Indeed.
If I'm rolling pretty good
exactly.
for perception
but
here.
It's a magic radiant blade instead of technology, because people get a little like, I don't know about technology in D&D. That's why the artificer is just like very strictly like, oh, it's like steampunk, but mostly magic, so nothing to worry about. So yeah, this is purely just divine magic. That isn't too powerful, because like early on, like people are a little bit apprehensive to do like high damage kind of thing. So for balance's sake, I just said like you hit more often for now, and also D&D is a little bit weird for like light spells. So you just kind of have to do like, there's a difference between light and dim light a little bit, but dim light is really just like illuminating walls and stuff, sort of like a soft backlight for those in the filmmaking business or has had too many classes with film kids. Matt, would you mind reading Channel Divinity?
I sure can. Channel Divinity. Also at 3rd level, you gain the following 2 Channel Divinity options. Number 1, Word of the World. You can use your Channel Divinity to augment your presence by building a connection with creatures you don't even know. As a bonus action, you grant yourself a +5 bonus to charisma checks for the next 10 minutes. And number 2 is Wounds of the World. You channel divinity to choose a number of creatures you can see within 30 feet of you, up to a number equal to your 1 plus charisma modifier for 1 minute. You and the creatures you choose glow with radiant light and add +1 plus your charisma modifier of radiant damage to their attacks once per roll.
Yes. Now, Channel Divinity is usually a bit of a mouthful, because like, you got like a few different bonuses and you got to like apply them to a certain number of people, but there's like limits on that naturally that kind of scale with time. It seems more complicated than it is, and some of these might seem overpowered, but the very important thing with homebrewing in general and what we're trying to homebrew here is that it's all about precedent. Like, these are actual numbers taken from a few different sort of subclasses throughout the years, straight from Wizards of the Coast, with a few differences so we don't get sued.
If we got those royalty-free character features.
Got that royalty-free SRD, kind of. But yeah, basically, I was thinking about like an advantage on charisma checks, but like rolling advantage is like rolling twice is like okay, but like doing it for every single check is a bit of a mouthful. So luckily there was some precedent to just have like a +5 flat for the 10 minutes, basically just to like basically diffuse things and like calm things down. Instead of just having like a weird like, oh, this person, you force a wisdom saving throw to do, the Jedi mind trick or something. And the Wounds of the World isn't really a Jedi thing, but it's just like a classic Paladin thing to like empower and enchant other people's weapons to basically be on your level, which is what the grind is all about.
Tell them to get good. And they fight better.
Next up at 7th level, we have the Aura of Connections. Every paladin gets an aura to give to other allies unless you're like a really evil paladin. There's a few evil paladin classes that are pretty fun, like Oath of Vengeance. You can just like, I can do more damage because I'm darker. My faith is in the darkness. Some stuff like that. But yeah, pretty simple Aura of Connection. You gain True Sight for 30 feet for allies within 10 feet of you. Yeah, that's a bit of an odd thing with most Paladin auras is that it's like creatures within a certain number of you, which automatically limits it because only a certain number of creatures can be within like a square on the map. Basically, D&D is like entirely in like a sort of like square sort of top plane map. 5 feet, one creature can be in. 10 feet, 4 creatures can be in. It's like a wider and wider area for more cube there is. Yeah,
it's like those electron maps from high school chemistry.
It's exactly like that, 100%. So yeah, you can only have so many electrons in your sort of high school chemistry map is how we'll refer to that for ease of access, let's say. Also, what's always cool about a paladin aura is that it increases to 30 feet, which basically you have to get it's like, okay, everyone huddle up. Here's a little bonus.
Here's a little bit of True Sight for you for your time.
Yeah, Paladin is also a really cool character because they're such a high charisma faith, because they're like a charisma-based faith class. Being by them just grants a lot of bonuses to your allies, just like being near them, which is always cool, like advantage on saving throws, stuff like that. But what's even cooler is a better laser sword. At 15th level, the sword hilt you choose for divine runes are empowered as you build your connection with the Radiant Blade itself. The divine hilt gains the following features. The blade gains properties of a thrown weapon. When you throw the blade, the attack is considered slashing damage when you land a ranged attack. You gain the thrown weapon fighting style. After you throw the blade, you can have the blade magically returned to you at the start of your turn. So, basically, to break this down, this is basically throwing a lightsaber, which is a very cool video game thing that only in the movies Rey could do because of, a lot of powers. Very video gamey powers all the way to the end. Yeah, it's cool to throw a laser sword and have it come back to you. Maybe in further editions, we could dexterity saving throw to catch it, but honestly, just like having to wait till the start of your next turn to catch it as a free action is always good. Or you can just like leave it stuck in someone too, you know?
Yeah.
Or just like waving around in the air, doing like the spitting sword thing of which is always a good feeling.
I mean, sometimes you need someone to hold on to it for you while you do something else, and so you can just leave it over there.
Exactly. Leave it flying about. Also at 15th level, while holding your blade, you can use your reaction to deflect a missile with using your Radiant Blade. When hit with a ranged attack, you can reduce the damage by 1d10, plus your Charisma modifier, plus your Paladin level. When the damage is reduced to 0, you deflect the missile back at your attacker. You can use Deflect Missile on magical ranged attacks. So basically, a few different spells require ranged attack rolls, which is easy. But the reason why that's such a mouthful is because Deflect Missile is a monk feature, like in the regular monk class, to where the very cool kung fu thing of catching a dart and throwing it back at someone. At 20th level, it escalates to the point where you can catch a full like boulder from a catapult and like hurl it back. Exactly like the ending of Kung Fu Panda 2, which is absolutely legendary. And also, there's nothing better than deflecting a laser with your lightsaber, dude. Like, nothing better in sound design, nothing better in video game design. You gotta put it in D&D. You just have to.
And when you're playing Jedi Fallen Order and you land that perfectly timed deflect and shoot it right back, that's chef's kiss.
That's what it's all about. That's why I'm playing it again. After seeing the Kenobi trailer. We'll keep the tangents to a minimum, but when was the last time you played Fallen Order, Matt?
I played it maybe like a year ago now, sometime during quarantine, which has all kind of blurred together. But
somewhere around there, yeah. That's a good quarantine.
I had a fun time playing it, so I would definitely recommend it. Truly
an all-timer game. That's a little glitchy. It's a game I love so much that I hit a game-breaking bug 3 hours in, and I had no problem starting it over, and it's still one of my favorite games. And now, finally, we come to the... Ooh, bless you.
Well, thank you.
The noise canceling kind of cut that out, but
yeah. I tried to mute myself real quick, but didn't quite hit the button on time.
No, you did though. I didn't. It was silent. Hold on.
Hell yeah! There we go.
And finally, we've hit 20th level, One with the World. You are the world's most powerful agent of balance. All of the connections you've made on your journey empower you for the final steps into becoming a legend. You gain the following features. You can cast Jump and Featherfall without using a spell slot. Once per long rest, you can cast the Telekinesis spell without using a spell slot. When an enemy creature starts its turn in your sword's light, it takes a 2d8 points of radiant damage. So basically, that's just a straight up divine smite every time they're in your sort of range of light within 10 feet of you. Yeah, it seems a little bit overpowered, but paladins are a very cool, interesting subclass in which, for your subclass features, you have to wait ages for the final payoff of level 20 to where you get some god level kind of stuff. And honestly, doing homebrew for paladins subclasses is super fun because you get to tie in like this sort of level of godhood and like superpowers. Making a comic book inspired homebrew book, you get to totally base it around like not only the concept of your character, but how much your character has grown over the course of the entire adventure, which always feels great. And yeah, that's Oath of Connection.
Nice.
Yeah, any thoughts, Matt? Anything that kind of puts off your sort of D&D character sense? You always make off-the-wall zany character.
We'll get to that later. Yeah, no, I can definitely work with this. If I hadn't already landed on a
yes,
trying to break your world character for the one shot we were doing, I might have gone down this route, as I do love Jedi and Star Wars.
Who doesn't? Except for a lot of people now.
Yeah, man, I would definitely be rocking a laser sword. That's fantastic.
Speaking of laser swords, and speaking of Matt's next character for our first one shot coming next time on vmearcana, announcing it here. Matt, would you mind reading the opening paragraph? For the Oath of the Future.
The future is doomed without you. You have sworn, by any means, to save the future from cosmic destruction, or magical destruction, or some kind of destruction. The powers at B have given you the power and chance to do so, even if they don't give too much information to go off of. Let me lay the scene a little bit here to introduce the character I'm going with this build. Most paladins, right, when people think of paladins, they're thinking like the Knights of the Round Table, like human
in a fantasy
people,
setting, not
in
from
a
the
fantasy
future.
setting, sword and shield. They've got some sort of like higher power giving them some sort of divine quest, like Sir Galahad type. My character is the Terminator, essentially, but he's not the Terminator. He's the Annihilator for copyright reasons.
Yeah, Matt is very aware of copyright, even though all of his characters are based off.
Are just blatant ripoffs.
But honestly, as any new DM should be aware of, fictional characters are fine. It can always be worse. The worst possible player is the one who makes characters off of celebrities. So honestly, just try your best to like. I've become very good at controlling Matt with his fictional inspirations to be like, oh yeah, sure, you can do a fictional inspiration. You're just crazy and you think of the world in the wrong way. So Matt made this future character for a high school mystery drama. It's their first one shot. So yeah, imagine in the CW, and imagine in Riverdale, imagine a robot from the future comes in and says, I'm going to save the future by solving your teen mystery. Which honestly isn't too far off of Riverdale, but
honestly, that does sound like a plot point that is in the works right now.
Yeah, it's the mid-season finale.
Just imagine like a Scooby-Doo crossover with the Terminator movies, I think is what we're going for.
Which is also kind of happened, I think. They did Scooby-Doo Apocalypse, which is just like 3 apocalypses happen at like once, and the Scooby-Doo gang have to do like with a robot Scooby have to run around.
So we're
solid
pretty close.
Enough run. Pretty close. Getting closer, we have this sort of sub-oaths of the future, the tenets that Matt must live by in this upcoming one-shot. Oaths. Augmentation. You must sacrifice whatever you were before. You must accept any offer that can make you stronger than any threats to the future. Vigilance. You must remain alert and assess any current threat to the future.
At least with my Terminator-esque character that I'm going for. Sort of the backstory, which I have to talk to one of our other players a bit more about it, is his character built me as a science project, essentially. And rather than like, more some sort of like cosmic or divine being kind of being my gathering. At least what I'm thinking at the moment is more just like his character and his character's future is kind of like the oath I've taken, because that's what he's like programmed into me as a robot. So whatever like upgrades he says I gotta get, like I'll get it because I'm a robot and he told me to. So we're going for kind of more of a Terminator 2 type setup here. Where his character's that little boy and I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll probably make a thumbs up reference at some point. And,
I mean, you have to, yeah. A bit of tabletop advice for anybody wanting to make a joke character every single time. We'll call this a table tip. It's pretty easy to give your players what you want. If you give your players like what you want initially, you can basically mold it to like rein it in a little bit later down the line. So yeah, just luckily make it like dependent on another character, or if you're trying to be like an edgelord, you have to like, you can like, okay, you can be a bit edgy, but you need this person for your own selfish gain. So that way you basically foster a connection or a relationship at the beginning without them being a complete edgelord. And now, Matt, I gotta tell you.
Tell me.
I went to change the PDF I was looking at, and then I just ended up reading from the same one again. So I'm going to read from the correct sub-oath this time. Okay. You alone must find threats to the future. You must always remain vigilant and active in stopping evil, or those in power, from dooming this world. Augmentation. Your body will never be strong enough to stop everything. You must take any power and any augmentation you have access to, regardless of the consequences. The greater good. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. When forced to make a tough decision, you make the choice for the future, not for yourself, and not even for a small few you could maybe save. It's a little bit of a darker kind of paladin, some darker oaths there, but you're trying to do the greater good, but you may have to be forced to either make some tough calls or take some punishment from the sort of deities from the future sort of guiding you. Basically to tell you, hey, knock it off.
Yeah, if you allow me to just spitball here for a little bit, an interesting way for me to take this greater good sub-oath might be that when I'm making choices, I'm pretty much just considering how it's going to affect my creator, the character that has programmed me, and even at the expense of others. And so part of that sort of like setup might get the other character, my creator character, to have to make some choices too, based on like what he kind of tells me to do, and that might make for some good character building between the two of us.
Yeah, really great moments, especially since as a science project, as a character, you are charged with protecting Eli's academic future more than anything. So, which is very fun. And also the Paladin spells for this one, Oath of the Future spells. There's a few highlights here. You get Wrathful Smite, which is just like, dark, edgy smite, that usually only a few warlocks can have, but we're just going to give it to you. Subclasses, another table tip is that a lot of subclasses can like bend the rules for a little bit for what spells you can get. As long as it works for the subclass, just take it. It's kind of the same thing with Alter Self. You can alter your like robotic parts or like, other things to like basically blend in better. I thought the Tongue spell is another highlight to like communicate with people, to like get information on the present and like, how they can be applied to the future. And of course, Legend Lore to see the past, to understand the present, to save the future. Now, that's a logline for most movies, probably starring Bruce Willis and probably a 5% of Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. And then we have the Channel Divinity, which is pretty cool for this. And then we have the Channel Divinity options, which are pretty cool, not going to lie. One of these is a precedent from a previous subclass that existed from Wizard of the Coast, but one of these is one of my own creations. At 3rd level, you can augment allies' vision to aid you in saving the future. You gain the following 2 Channel Divinity options. Hindsight. You take an action to give others your knowledge of the future. As an action, you can choose 1 plus your charisma modifier creatures you can see to have advantage on saving throws. Present threat. You mark an enemy as a threat to the future. As a bonus action, you choose a creature within 30 feet that has disadvantage on all saving throws. And all allies add 2d8 radiant damage to the first attack they land on the creature. 2d8 is the damage a Divine Smite can do, the Paladin's main bread and butter. To be like a little bit nicer about it, I said like the first attack they land, but in playtesting, if you guys do too much damage in this one shot, I'll probably rein it back to on their first attack, and then if they miss, they don't get to do it. But that's a little mean for a Channel Divinity that you only get once per day. From level 1 to 20, you only get one Channel Divinity a day.
Aura of Hindsight. At 7th level, you emit an aura where the future can't surprise you or your allies. You and the creatures you choose within 10 feet of you can't be surprised and have a +1 added to their initiative. At 18th level, the aura increases to 30 feet.
Yeah, classic aura for initiative that's inspired by the Oath of the Watchers, which is also a super cool Paladin class that I'll play soon. When it's all about like magic eyes and stuff. Speaking of magic eyes and other magic stuff, we go to the star of the show. At 15th level, we have upgrades. At 15th level, your deity has given you the power to upgrade your weapons and your own body to stop future threats. You choose 2 of the following upgrades. Sword Hilt. You enchant a divine sword hilt that you can ignite as a free action. Igniting it creates a +2 to your proficiency bonus, Blade of Pure Radiant Light. That does 1d8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier of radiant damage. So yeah, basically it's a lightsaber, a laser sword. And these other 2 are laser weapons. You enchant a crossbow to produce infinite radiant bolts that do 2d6 plus your proficiency bonus and your charisma modifier of radiant damage once per attack action. So crossbows, this is a little bit of a confusing 5e that I always have to look up when it comes up. That crossbows have something called the loading property. Instead of like reloading every once in a while, you have to like load the crossbow and shoot it. So you only get to fire 1 sort of crossbow bolt per action, even if you have 2 attacks in 1 action at like later levels with martial characters. And the broken bow, you enchant a radiant bowstring to do infinite radiant arrows. They do 1d6, but you can attack twice per action. So you can fire 2 arrows in an attack action. Crossbows, you can only fire 1 bolt. It's a little confusing, but it makes sense during play. You also have an arcane arm. You can replace your arm with an instrument of divine metal that gives 2 plus your charisma fire to your AC and resistance to radiant damage. That's just the classic Cable from X-Men, future hero. You gotta get a metal arm. You gotta get a metal eye. Arcane eye. You replace your eye with a divine arcane mechanical eye that grants a permanent true sight of 60 feet and an advantage on perception and insight checks. That might be a little overpowered. That'll take some playtesting later on. And augmented champion isn't too complicated. At 20th level, you are fully evolved to save the future from certain destruction. You gain all features from the list of upgrades. Also, you now crit on a roll of 19 or 20. So yeah, maybe we'll have some better ideas for level 20 down the line, but I thought might as well keep it simple. Might as well be like fully just sort of upgraded and have a lot of versatility at level 20. And also just like roll damage better, because that's always fun.
Yeah, so I always like rolling damage. I love that little dopamine hit when you get good damage on an attack roll.
Increased crits is always fun. And honestly, spread the wealth, fighters. Fighters can crit on like 17 at some point if you're a champion fighter, 18 if you're a normal fighter. It's pretty wild. Might as well spread the critical wealth.
Exactly. Everyone needs to land a crit every once in a while. It's good for the soul.
And what's good for the soul is good for a D&D game.
Exactly.
Which is the Paladin's whole deal. Is just like, hey, I'm living my best life. I'm doing a lot of care for my soul so I can make other souls leave the bodies of evil.
Exactly. You gotta have your soul feeling good so you can do God's work. Which is kicking ass.
Which is kicking ass and ending a podcast dramatically. So that's the end of our show. We have 2 great Paladin subclasses down in the tank, and we have many more subclasses to come. I shouldn't have stopped there. But before that, we have a very special announcement. We are doing our first playtest. We are going to play a one-shot of D&D where Matt will play as the Oath of the Future, and we'll play those high school characters that we were talking about. We are joined by Eli, Matt, and Matt's wife, Maddie.
Oh, my wife.
My wife.
My wife.
So if you already didn't close the podcast after that little riff, that little reference, feel free to check out patreon.com/vmearcana to check out the PDFs we talked about. Feel free to email us at vmearcana@gmail.com to ask questions about the show or tell us that you don't like the show. Feel free. If you put in the effort, I'll accept it. You can review the show on whatever podcast platform you're using. It helps sometimes, probably. Hopefully. Or you can keep all your opinions to yourself and enjoy your blissful ignorance of playing rules as written Dungeons & Dragons. Or you can be brave and playtest stuff for us and give us your feedback. As we say at the end of every VME Arcana episode, stay safe and stay sane, everyone.